Kim, let me ask you about channels as well. Where are we marketing ourselves best right now in these particular times? The world's obviously shrunk an awful lot, hasn't it? Where are you seeing businesses succeed in their marketing efforts? And are those that are succeeding suddenly doing something different? Are they using different methods or different channels? Are you seeing a lot of change, or is it just doing the same things that we've done before, just more smartly or with better messaging?
I think the sort of mirroring crisis and non-crisis times is an interesting one. So a lot of businesses that I start working with rely almost solely on referrals for their business, because I work with a lot of service businesses. And I think but don't necessarily do anything to generate those referrals. So it's a very passive approach to lead generation. And I think that's where a lot of businesses come unstuck when you go into crisis mode, because you don't have that infrastructure in place. You don't have the tool processes that generate leads on a consistent basis. Because often what you'll find is it's not very different in crisis mode. You might have to turn some things up and turn some things down and change things, 5-10 degrees to change your course, but actually not a huge amount changes. If you're starting from scratch right now, that can feel really hard. So I hope that everyone sort of uses this as a learning experience to think, okay, whether we're in crisis or out of crisis, we need to have that consistent lead generation that is going to, support our business. That said, I'm seeing some interesting approaches from a few different businesses out there that I think are great. One I think is worth mentioning is Emily, who makes snacks. I don't know if you've seen them online. So they did their first ever outdoor billboard campaign just as lockdown hit.
Oh, I love this. It's really smart.
I don't know, and I'll have to check the story. So I don't know whether they had it planned anyway and couldn't pull the ad spend, so had to go ahead, or whether they decided that this was a really great idea. I'll check up on this. But they did pivot the ads themselves. So I'll just read them out. I've got them here. One of them said, "Our first ever poster seen by one runner and a pigeon." Do an ad when it's warmer, they said. More people will see it, they said. And then we should have made a TV ad instead. And what they've done is post pictures online of these brilliant ads that have, of course, gone viral because they're so funny and so clever. So I think being a bit clever, adapting. I mean, they've gone meta with their advertising, but I think that was superb. So not being limited by what you've already got in place is important. I think physical products are doing really well. I think there is a lot of digital noise. I know a lot of businesses are finding it hard to get their voice heard now that everyone's online, everyone's doing a webinar, everyone's trying to do more video. So physical products work really well. So one of my clients is a brilliant company called Newspaper Club, and they allow businesses and individuals to print their own newspapers. And they're finding that their customers are keeping in touch with their customers more and more through a physical product rather than a digital product. And that's working really well. I love getting posts at the moment. It's the highlight of my day when something pops through my letterbox. So I think that's really interesting. If you are able to access your customers through a physical product, I think it's a wonderful way of keeping in touch. So, and I think just the final thing to mention on that is it's okay to be a bit scrappy at the moment. You will be forgiven. It does not have to be perfect. There was another brilliant viral video that went around from a stunt school. I don't know if you saw that, where the stuntmen and women had just put together a 2-minute video of them seemingly punching each other through the camera, and it was this sort of chain of amazing stunts that they'd all just recorded in sequence. It didn't have high production values, but it worked really well. I imagine that stunt school is not going to need to advertise for the next 10 years now that that's around. So it's okay just to have a go. It's okay. People, when I did my first webinar 5 years ago, I was terrified. There was a real expectation that we had to be very, if anything went wrong, it would be horrendous and I would be so embarrassed. And, it was very sort of formal and buttoned up. Now, if my kids come through the door right now, I'm a bit less worried about it because everyone knows how hard it is to do these things. So if your video doesn't have a wonderful production value, I think that's okay. Just have a bit of a go. Don't be afraid to get out there and try something new. Just try and do something a bit different. That's all I would say. Don't feel the pressure to do it because someone else is doing it. Find your groove, stick to it, have a go, and just try to be as visible as you can.
I think that's lovely advice. I mean, we've seen some wonderful experiments with some of our clients or people within our community. So Aaron and I were laughing on one of the earlier videos in this series because he's got a client who usually does puppy training classes. Definitely not one that you would think could easily go online. But is going down a storm because they have taken their puppy training classes online. And the curiosity element for a lot of us about how the hell do you train a puppy and get it to sit in front of a screen, let alone absorb anything that it's been. So the curiosity and the storytelling around it has got them a lot of attention. And who knew? They've discovered they could make it work. So that's a business that's completely out of its comfort zone. It's by no means polished, or at least it wasn't in the early couple of sessions, but it worked. The customers loved it. The puppies seemed to enjoy it and get something out of it. And I suspect, again, a bit like your stunt guys, they won't have any difficulty being remembered, but also continuing their business afterwards. And one of my favorites recently was South London group of tradespeople. They come together under a brilliant founding partner's business called Solo Craft Fairs. And these are all the artisanal craftspeople. You don't have to be an experienced craftsperson to sell usually in their craft fairs. But of course, COVID hit, and the first thing that happened is nobody went to any physical gatherings or spaces, and the craft fairs were massively hard hit. And they went online to Instagram. They figured out a way to hold virtual craft fairs at particular times each week. And now they've discovered that people from far and wide, internationally, all around the world, are coming onto the virtual craft space in Instagram, and they were frantically sort of teaching themselves how to administer all of these things, to the point where they've actually said, you know what, we'll probably retain a virtual crafts fair when we go back. And I mean, it's been a huge learning exercise for them, but it's really worked. And I think your advice about it can be a bit scrappy, but do go and experiment with some of these things, because from the seeds of the slight madness, at least on the side of virtual puppy training classes, come real businesses and real stories, and actually people and businesses that we sort of fall in love with and will remember. So, it's I think a lot of the time it's the emotion and the story behind some of the decisions that we make, even if ultimately we might end up doing a poster saying, well, that didn't work that well. But hey, we tried. And that of itself is a conversation and a communication that, hopefully we can carry our customers along with.